Because one of the biggest complaints we've seen all the time is, hey, I raised this capital, I came into defense, my capital doesn't understand the market. They don't understand that I need security clearances, or I need accreditation, or I need whatever it may be.
Sure.
And I'm getting shrieked at by my board.
Right.
What advice would you have for them? Like, how can they be best prepared to stand out among that real select cohort of like 1A defense investors?
But I think what a lot of people don't realize is the economics behind venture actually aren't all that great when you're particularly starting out small. Like a $50 million fund has to run that fund traditionally off of $1 million a year to run the entire program. That includes legal fees, travel, any pay if you are paying yourself.
And that part right there, I don't think a lot of people realize.
I don't think so either.
Like it is really, there is a startup aspect to it.
Right.
In the early days.
I think the folks actually starting the funds, the true GPs, they really understand this because they've had to do the math and they've looked at this. And they, when you go and you ask for money, you have to explain what your limited partner agreement, your LPA is going to look like. I think it's the folks that are trying to get in. They see these funds and they're like, oh, these guys raised $100 million. I'd love to go join them. I'm like, they have 7 people on their team. They're running that off $2 million a year. Like, they're not adding any people to that team. Yeah. And they're probably not paying all of those people like significant wages.
And it's also not the VC on Twitter that you see that's like in Miami at a party.
Right.
And then in San Fran meeting with founders at some nice, like you've got to sort of punch your tickets to get there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work. You have to actually do, you kiss a lot of frogs to get through to those companies you really, really want to invest in. So it takes a long time of meeting. And it's hard too. Telling companies you don't want to invest in them is not a fun job.
Well, most of them just don't say no.
They
the other gift of being a VC.
Yeah, you just stop. Yeah. Right. Yeah, you do. I mean, one thing particularly like where the team I'm on, we invest Series B and later. So we tend to never burn bridges when we can avoid it, right?
Smart.
Like we want to keep those connections going. We want to see them be successful.
And even ghosting isn't really a burned bridge. It's a little bit of showbiz, right? Like,
it is. Oh,
if you don't understand that as a founder or a fundraiser, I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
Absolutely.
For every cool pitch I think I'm giving you, you're getting 50 others that day.
Right.
Cold, warm, all over the place.
And everybody's dealing with the same problems of, I'm contacting people on email, LinkedIn, text, Slack. I mean, it's just this deluge of information all the time. Trying to keep up with that is near impossible.
All right. So we talk, and I'm working my way towards you sharing a little bit about SVDG and sort of where they sit. But we've gone through sort of the private capital. We've gone through sort of the startup side. But I want to talk about the government a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think you and I have given our best years to national security and are quite passionate about it.
Yes.
I think a part of me dies every time I see DOD or the broader government just completely fumble what should be a runaway touchdown in innovation or like actually bridging the gap between emerging tech. With so much talk around valleys of death and the like really cyclical nature of key political sort of appointees. Talk to me about like, what's your outlook? Like, are you confident our ability to actually deal with sort of near peer type stuff to really scale some tech?
Sure. It depends on what day of the week it is. It's like peaks and valleys in like a by the minute phase. There are moments where I'm super excited. I get all these indicators that like, this is the time DOD and Congress is really going to get it right. And the investor community and the entrepreneurial community are all coming together. And I get super excited. And like 5 minutes later, I see something that, just like you said, just kind of like crushes my soul. And like, we completely missed the boat on this. So it's a big system. So there's going to be ups and downs all over it. I will say, so the Silicon Valley Defense Group, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. The goal is to be a connector to all sides of this equation.
Yeah.
And on the industry side, that's everything from the proverbial 2 folks in a garage all the way up to the largest tech and defense companies, because we think that entire spectrum is important. We bias heavily into sort of the mid-stage venture space just because we can really target those companies and you can really identify.
Big enough to be real. You can sort of put a little weight behind it.
Exactly. Right. How much can we really help 2 folks in a garage?
You want to get them to the door, get them through the door.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then on the government side, it's everything from the end user to, POTUS, but we heavily bias towards the policymakers. That's political appointees in the Pentagon, senior defense in uniform, and then Congress. Yeah. And then the last part is the venture community. So there are those VCs we already talked about that are hyper focused on defense. They really understand it. We largely support that community first. We also spend some time trying to bring in new investors and kind of educating more traditional VCs that haven't previously seen this as a good market. So that's really SVDG's role in this space. As far as like what we see on the government side, I mean, we bounced around. Like the origin story of the group goes back to sitting down with Senator John McCain in 2015, shortly after he had seen SpaceX, and saying, how do we do this like 10 more times? How do we get private capital to just build this massive organization? So we spent a lot of time in Congress. But
are we calling Anderl one of those, or are we saying we've done it 0 times so far?
Well, I'd say you could do the real pot. You could definitely say SpaceX is a win. Palantir is a win. They've IPO'd. They're profitable. In the public markets. They're now profitable. And then there's some like very close followers to that. I think there's some other defense unicorns. A lot of folks call them the Sharpies, right? So on the government side, we bounce back and forth. You mentioned it earlier. I had the opportunity to work for Hondo Gertz. I worked for Ellen Lord before that. I think both of them did a phenomenal job really pushing for change. Will Roper's in that category. Mike Brown at DIU.
Will Roper just launched a new
CEO of a new Eric Schmidt-backed company. So still out there in the fray. And then, Raj Shah, like there was just a strong cohort of people inside government pushing for that. Right now, we've actually seen it get a lot quieter on that side. So at SVDG, we kind of are opportunistic and we just pivot to where we can get the pressure. And right now, the House primarily seems to be the place that's coming from. Now, the nice thing is it's both authorizers and appropriators, which we haven't had a lot of push from some of those folks before. So it's been really good to see some of the language coming out, like AppFit, which was the Warfighter Innovation Fund.
Almost filling a gap in the Pentagon right now. And I mean, I hate to say the quiet part out loud, but it's underwhelming.
I would agree 100% with that. Yeah. I think there are some folks that are trying to do it, but they're also getting pushed down by 1,000 other requirements that they have to go look at, little R requirements.
What do you tell you reference sort of the set of investors who are like all in as a sort of throwaway term, but who are committed and who are educated about defense and because one of the biggest complaints we've seen all the time is, hey, I raised this capital. I came into defense. My capital doesn't understand the market. They don't understand that I need security clearances or I need accreditation or I need whatever it may be.
Sure.
And I'm getting shrieked at by my board.
Right.
How does startup, say mid-stage, right? Seed A, how do they find this group of investors sort of we're talking about? Because there's a lot of noise out there and the signals are increasingly elusive.
Right.
And as you see them both on the venture side and on sort of defense, what advice would you have for them? Like, how can they be best prepared to stand out among that real select cohort of like 1A defense investors?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is share your portfolio, who you're working with, and let them do the talking for you. Get your portcos out there saying like, I was talking with a company that was telling me about one of their investors and saying how many doors they open for them, right? Because VCs shouldn't just be writing a check and then disappearing, right? That isn't actually the model. They should be opening up their network, helping the companies, particularly when you start getting to growth stage. How do you bring in that professional C-suite that's going to elevate your company, that's going to bring in, eventually you have to go into the public markets, hopefully, right? Like, so how do you build the team that does that? So your VCs should be doing that work with you. And the more that can come from the existing portcos, the better off you are. So, there's ways to share that. Some people do it on Twitter. Some people do it on podcasts. Some people do it at conferences. But I think it's still a relatively small cohort of companies really doing this. I mean, at the bigger size, there's 8VC, Founders Fund, Lux, Andreessen. There's just an article out. Looks like General Catalyst is really getting involved.
Getting back in.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited to see that article.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And there are others in there.
Didn't have it on my bingo card for 2023.
No. It was
had aliens though.
Right.
Good. So I got the balloons.
So you're winning that one?
I'm up one.
It's a huge win.
Yeah. It's as we talk about Silicon Valley Defense Group and sort of your convening capability and where you sit, right? I'd almost want to hear, as you look forward 12 months, what's success? Like, what does it look like? We're doing a dinner tomorrow night, right?
Right.
Give me that 12 months down the road. hopefully some of these wins on the Hill. What's that really start to look like? What's the best case? What's the worst case?
Yeah. So I think one of the big areas that a lot of people have focused is around SBIR. I actually don't spend a lot of time thinking about SBIR. I think there's some quick, easy fixes they could do with that, but it's such a politicized and like sort of messy program, and it's also not designed for the startup community. Be very clear, like
not one bit.
It is it is run by the Small Business Administration, not the Startup Business Administration. Yep. So the $3 to $4 billion a year that goes out of SBIR, if we can get anything good into sort of the high growth, rapid startup phase, that's a huge win. What I think we have the opportunity to do in the next 12 months is leverage some of the existing things that they've been putting together in the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill in the last 12 to 24 months and target that into not just SBIR, but all those dollars and that big funnel at the beginning.
Yeah.
So like expand AppFit beyond the $150 million that it is now into 500, even $1 billion, that we can really target that. Use the new Office of Strategic Capital to train up a small...
Give it capital?
Give it capital, give it authority.
Crazy concept.
Yeah. Although I do actually think the model of building the office first and giving time to come up with exactly what those authorities and how much money should be there, as opposed to the reverse, which DoD loves to do, which is go behind the wall, build this perfect model, and then come out and be like...
Trusted, but not strategic capital.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Hey, industry, we have a solution.
Right. And it took, no plane survives first contact. Right. Man. So
didn't even get to contact.
No, not even
close.
That
was terrible.
So I think there's real opportunity to use a bunch of these tools, use the existing structure of DIU, which has a lot of relationships in the Valley, in Chicago, in Austin, Boston. How do we take all those things and target kind of that giant funnel that some of the early innovation groups have created? Yep. And how do we leverage that to get companies to scale rapidly and actually start producing things?
Yeah.